St. Peter's Church welcomes you to 3 sessions on the state of the nation in preparation for Independence Day. We have external experts speaking on workers, on housing, and on the environment. The first talk this evening is by a veteran trade union leader of an alumnus of St. Xavier's College and a well-known figure in the workers' world, Mr. Vivek Monteiro. He gives a very scholarly discourse on the demands of workers today in the background of the Constitution. The views expressed are not on behalf of any political party, but they are a reflection on the need for policies that will further the common good.
I thank Father Fraser Mascarenhas for inviting me to share some thoughts and ideas with you. Today, let me begin by talking about a important demonstration that took place in our Mumbai 3 days back on the 9th of August. And that is the 9th of August, Bharat Chhoro campaign of the Trade Union Joint Action Committee, Maharashtra, otherwise known as the Kamgar Sangatna Sanyukt Kriti Samiti, Maharashtra. It was called the Save India campaign, and this campaign took place everywhere in the country, in all states, in all districts. Here in Maharashtra, it was the first public program of the trade unions jointly after the lockdown. Let me talk about the important issues and demands of this campaign. About 1,500 of us gathered at Agast Kranti Maidan nearby at Grant Road Station, and the banners that we carried expressed the issues and demands. Of course, the overall demand was that there are 2 dangers facing this country right now, grave dangers. One is the COVID crisis, and the second is the policies of the Modi government, what we call Modi Niti. The demands specifically were as follows. The first was stop the Modi government plan to scrap 44 existing central labor laws, which are the product of a century of effort, and also scrap the proposed 4 labor code bills because they are anti-worker, they are anti-union, and they are anti-poor. Another demand was that today there are crores of workers who are without work, without income. Many of them were migrant workers. We know about how difficult a period they had during the lockdown and what difficulties they faced to go back home. Demand is for free rations to all migrant and unorganized sector worker families for the next 6 months. A third demand is, since there are crores of people without income, without work, there should be 10,000 subsistence allowance every month for every needy family. A demand which all of us will immediately understand is to strengthen public health, build public hospitals, and increase government spending on public health to 3% of the gross domestic product. While these workers are back in their villages without work, and many of them have come back and they are still without work because of lockdown, so there should be employment through the employment guarantee schemes, NREGS, Manrega, strengthened employment guarantee give minimum 200 days work at a minimum wage of 500 rupees per day. Another set of demands has to do with what the Modi government is doing. I'll explain that a little later. But the demand is to stop the handover of the nation's resources to corporate bosses, stop the privatization of Coal India, Bharat Petroleum and the Indian Railways. A related demand is to save and strengthen the public transport systems, save state transport and save BEST. There are demands regarding social security for senior citizens. Every senior citizen should have a minimum pension of rupees 5,000 per month. And of course, the question is raised is, where is all the money for this going to come? Well, one way to do this is to stop wasteful, expensive, unnecessary expenditure, scrap the bullet train, scrap the Central Vista projects, both of which together are around 2 lakh crores of rupees. There are demands also pertaining to the other sections like the farmers, and giving a remunerative minimum support price for farmers' produce is important for our food security and for the security of the farmers. It's interesting that the trade unions also took up certain specifically political demands. Why, we will see later. One demand is stop misuse of the CBI, the NIA and the ED against the democratic opposition. We know what is happening today in the various states, how dissenters are being put into jail on very flimsy and no grounds in order to curb dissent. What is happening in the buying and selling and destabilizing of governments in various states. And another demand refers to the communal virus that is spreading in the country, and it says, this is in Marathi, it says, coronavirus hatao, nafrat ki rajniti hatao, kamgar ekta badhao, Bharat Desh bachao. As you can see, these are very comprehensive demands and some of them are very political. Why has it been necessary for us as trade unions to raise these demands today? This slide says it all. Save India, save Constitution, save democracy. What is happening today as a part of Modi Niti is seen by the trade unions as an attack on the Indian Constitution, on the values of the Constitution and on the democratic structure, democratic rights of all of us. I am addressing these thoughts to you today as one Indian to another. And of course the question comes, what do we mean by Indianness? What does it mean to be an Indian today? I think the one short answer to that is that an Indian today is a person who strongly believes and defends the Indian Constitution. That is what decides whether or not we are Indians. And it is in this spirit that I want to take this discussion a little further. I want to talk a little bit about our Constitution and the values of the Constitution. These values of the Constitution, which we know are there in the preamble, did not just come out of the minds of a few individuals like Dr. Ambedkar or Jawaharlal Nehru or Rajendra Prasad. These values were the result of a very long history and a number of struggles which took place over a period of more than a century. First is the struggle against institutionalized inequality, the struggle for equality. The second is the struggle against colonial rule, the struggle for independence. The third is the struggle for workers' rights and rights of other working people. And of course, the struggle for establishing a democratic society, a democratic polity, a secular democratic polity. These four struggles went around the same time over the last many decades, over the last more than 100 years. Let us begin in 1848 with the work of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule and Fatima Sheikh in establishing the first school for women and Shudras in Pune in 1848. This was the beginning of the struggle for equality, the struggle against the denial of education to the majority of Indian people. Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, in fact, is the initiator of three of these struggles which I mentioned earlier: the struggle for equality, the struggle for workers' rights, struggle for women's rights. His disciple, Narayan Meghaji Lokhande, Lokhande was a member of the Satyashodak Samaj started by Mahatma Phule. Lokhande was the harbinger of organization among the workers, and the workers' movement begins with the work of Narayan Meghaji Lokhande. As we go forward, let us go forward 50 years to the 1931 resolution of the Congress Party in Karachi. The Congress Party is formed towards the end of the latter part of the 19th century, and each of their congresses, which were held every year, we get to see the evolution of the ideas. In 1931, there was the historic Karachi Congress, which was presided over by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And it is in this Congress that a number of important ideas are put forward as the basis for a future Indian constitution. This is, as you can see, many years before the constitution was actually drafted, about 20 years prior. Here we have the statement of fundamental rights: freedom of association, freedom of press, freedom to profess religion of your choice. And point number 2, religious neutrality on the part of the state, secularism. Here we have the enunciation of a living wage for industrial workers, healthy conditions of work, protection of women workers, and the right of workers to form unions. Here we have the formulation of perhaps the most important democratic principle of adult suffrage: one vote for every person, and only one vote for every person. Free primary education, and last but not the least, the control by the state of key industries and mineral resources. I mention this because later, as we go ahead, we come to the work of Nehru and Dr. Ambedkar, the makers of modern Indian democracy. Dr. Ambedkar was the chairperson of the drafting committee, but actually the constitution that he wanted was something much stronger than what the constitution finally emerged as. The constitution that he wanted was expressed in his book called States and Minorities, and this is what he was advocating in States and Minorities. He says that the state must play an active role in eliminating the historic inequalities and exclusions of Indian society. We are entering independence in a situation where a vast number of people, perhaps the majority, are denied certain basic rights. So the state must play a role in removing this exclusion and inequality. He says that therefore we need socialism, state socialism. He says that political emancipation is not enough. We need economic emancipation. He asks that land should be a national resource, and of course the doctrine of universal suffrage, one man, one value, one vote. The ideas of Dr. Ambedkar did get reflected in the Constitution, but not in the main part of the Constitution, which is the fundamental rights, and that part which can be enforced by law. His concerns and the concerns, many of the concerns of the Karachi Congress are reflected in that part of the Constitution known as the directive principles. Directive principles are certain points which show the direction in which the country must proceed in future. And since there was no consensus, for example, on making education a fundamental right at that time, so education and universal education was put into the directive principles. Of course, today education is a fundamental right because we have passed laws subsequently to take education from the directive principles into the fundamental rights. That was what was intended about the other aspects of the directive principles also. This is a point to note. Many of us, though we are Indians, are not familiar with this document called the Constitution. Many of us do not know some of the points which I am going to highlight now about the directive principles. Article 38 talks about making a welfare state. It says the state to secure a social order for the promotion of welfare of the people. I am reading out from the Constitution. It says the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic and political shall inform all the institutions of the national life. 2. The state shall in particular strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate, not just minimize, eliminate inequalities in status, facilities and opportunities. It talks about natural resources for the common good. It says, Article 39, certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. The state shall in particular direct its policy towards securing that the citizens, men and women equally, have the right to an adequate means of livelihood for all. That the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good, and that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. This is clearly at variance to what is happening in our country over the last few decades. As everybody knows, inequalities are increasing, and as we see later, the common resources are being transferred from the common ownership into the hands of the private corporate sector. This is clearly not in the direction envisaged by the directive principles. Article 41 of the directive principles talks about the right to work, right to education, and social security in times of unemployment, old age, sickness, and disablement. It talks about securing just and humane conditions of work. Article 43 talks about a living wage for workers. It says the state shall endeavor to secure by suitable legislation or economic organization or in any other way to all workers, agricultural, industrial or otherwise, work, a living wage, conditions of work ensuring a decent standard of life, and full enjoyment of leisure and social and cultural opportunities. Some of the demands that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, the demand for 10,000 rupees, the demand for free rations, the demand for a pension of 5,000 rupees. As you can see, these are not something out of the way. This is what the directive principles are talking about. And that is why I said that those demands are both necessary and possible. All the demands that were raised earlier are necessary and possible. Last but not the least, in the readings from the Constitution, I want to talk about the fundamental duties of Indian citizens which are there in Article 51A. I will not read the entire list. I will only read 2 or 3. These are the fundamental duties of each of us as Indian citizens. The first is to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions. Let's go forward to 51AE, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, regional or sectional diversities, and to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women, and to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Now let's come to the present and why it is that the trade unions are demanding that Modi Niti should be shown the door. Bharat Chodo, Modi Niti ko hatao. Why is it that the trade unions are making this demand? I think it is not only the trade unions. Today, a lot of the employers are also understanding that Modi Niti has resulted in their decline. It has ruined their businesses and their industries and their trade. In fact, there is a comprehensive failure of Modi Niti. Modi was elected with Vikas as an agenda. But what do we see in practice? There is a comprehensive failure of the Modi government in the economic sphere. Demonetization was a complete disaster. Unemployment is at its highest in 45 years. For the first time since independence, the total electricity consumption fell in 2019. And the failure of the economic policy is resulting in a banking collapse, one after the other. My union, CITU, was opposing these policies, the neoliberal economic policies, from the very outset in 1990. At that time, there were not many unions who were opposing these policies. But since 2010, for the first time in post-independence history, all the major trade unions have come together to defend against the attacks on labor rights by this NDA government. And at that time, of course, it was the UPA government. From 1990 till today, there have been 18 All India strikes by the Joint Trade Union Platform against these neoliberal policies. The last took place in 8th January this year. I would like to point out that among the demands that were raised 3 days back at Agast Kranti Maidan was a demand pertaining to rejecting the new education policy 2020. And why is this so? Again, for the same reasons which I have been talking about earlier. This policy is not consistent with the values of the Indian Constitution. There is an erosion of the rights of states under the Constitution. There is increased centralization and control. There is a violation of the Right to Education Act 2009. That is a fundamental right under the Constitution. A withdrawal of the responsibility of the state. The new policy promotes inequality. It promotes commercialization. There is no mention of reservation policy for Dalits. It tries to impose Hindi and Sanskrit, and very clearly it abandons the constitutional value of secularism. And last but not the least, it tries to promote virtual and online education, maybe taking advantage of the COVID crisis. Perhaps the time has come to build a consensus around education, a national consensus around education. And what are the elements of this consensus? Clearly, they would have to be the values of the Indian Constitution. Let me highlight those values which have an important role to play in education. One is, we have to defend equality, defend secularism, defend the policy of reservation and affirmative action, the rights of states, local languages, and of course defend scientific temper and the right to question. Today there is very big efforts being made by the media and by the government to argue or to convince people that those people who are asking questions, those people who are dissenting, they are anti-nationals. I would like to point out to the Prime Minister, to the Education Minister, that the right to question is an important part of scientific temper. And as Indian citizens, it is our duty to question, and it is their duty as Indian citizens also to encourage Indian citizens, Indian students to constantly ask questions, to constantly seek truth through evidence. That is what is scientific temper. First of all, I would like to stress that there is no fundamental conflict between religious belief and scientific temper. You might be surprised to hear me saying this, but I make the statement because in our Indian tradition, there is a tradition of scientific temper in the writings of our religious leaders, in the writings of Buddha and in the traditions of Narayan Guru, Tukaram. There is a history, there is a tradition of asking questions. And therefore, I would say that there is a relationship of friendship between what we may call democratic and humanistic religion and democratic and humanistic scientific temper. The battle is somewhere else. The battle is between democratic religion and scientific temper on one side and communal bigotry and religious hatred on the other. That is where the line has to be drawn. Let us read something that Buddha wrote more than 2,500 years back. He says, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it." Something from Swami Vivekananda. Superstition is our great enemy, but bigotry is worse. To believe blindly is to degenerate the human soul. Be an atheist if you want, but do not believe in anything unquestioningly. From Gandhi, who was a very devout religious person, nothing in the Shastras which is capable of being reasoned can stand if it is in conflict with reason. Faith becomes lame when it ventures into matters pertaining to reason. The point is that as Indians, we have to question, we have to separate religion from politics, and a conflict between religion and science enters only when religion begins to claim that what it is saying is based on scientific evidence. Scientific evidence has a different set of laws. It is not based on belief. It is based on disbelief, on questioning, on doubt. But if one observes the principles of secularism, observes the principle of respect for others' opinions, then we can be both secular and religious. Of course, the attack on rationality is something which is very much part of the attacks which have taken place on the Constitution values over the last several years. We have lost Dr. Dabholkar, Professor Kalburgi, Gauri Lankesh, Comrade Pansare. After Dabholkar was killed, this is the resolution passed by the All India People's Science Network on that very day. It says, "We take inspiration from the life of Dr. Narendra Dabholkar and pledge to carry forward his work and ideals of spreading the scientific temper and opposing all forms of superstition and religious obscurantism. We pledge to combat the forces of communal fascism and terrorism acting in the name of religion, which are active in different parts of the country today. We affirm the values of the Indian Constitution of scientific temper, secularism, equality and democracy, and will work to carry their message to every school, to every town and village of our country." And therefore, in conclusion, I would like to suggest, to submit that the workers' unions, what we are fighting for, what we are trying to protect, what values we are trying to take forward, and those of us who are working in education, there is a common and a collective effort. Going forward from August 9th, 3 days ahead we have August 15th, the anniversary of Indian independence. 5 days after that we have August 20th, which is now being observed as the National Scientific Temper Day all over the country. And the slogan of NSTD, National Scientific Temper Day, that is the death anniversary of Dr. Narendra Dabholkar. The slogan is Ask Why, Pucho Kyun, Vichara Ka. Let us go forward with these values. With this appeal, I conclude this sharing of thoughts, and I hope that in the coming days we will work together. I once again thank Father Mascarenhas for this opportunity to come before you. Thank you, friends.